Hi, this is Kirby Sommers, and I welcome you to the Epstein Project podcast. Today I'm going to be discussing Bill Gates, and I believe that by the time I am through explaining the information that I've kind of stumbled upon, it will start connecting some of the dots that have been hidden, intentionally hidden, for a very long time, and it will begin to shed light on the connection between people who have been denying, and I will be talking about these names. Before I get started, however, I want to thank my sponsor, Dr. Vicky. Um, she has an amazing clinic in Rochester, Minneapolis. It's called a new Met Spa. And what she does is she provides non-surgical low-risk services for anti-aging and facial rejuvenation. And she can literally turn back the clock 10 years or more in just one or two visits. So if you happen to be in Rochester, Minneapolis, going there for some of their world famous medical care, pay her a visit. Her website is metspa.clinic. And please support sponsors who support this work. All right, Bill Gates. I can hardly wait to get into this story. Bill Gates has denied any kind of relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. And so I'm going to bring up some information. And at the end of this, I think that we're not going to be able to allow Bill Gates to sort of gaslight us anymore because there's a lot of extenuating circumstance that I have found that shows that Gates really was perhaps much closer to Epstein that he has let on. Um, so a couple of days ago, one of the attorneys for 9 of Jeffrey Epstein's victims, um, Kevin Spencer or Spencer Cooven. I think it's Spencer Cooven. I have his name here. Spencer Cooven told the Sun that Gates should volunteer any information about the perv or his pals that could help in the Ghislaine Maxwell investigation. And then he added that he has the same issue with Prince Andrew, that, Bill Gates really should just step forward and tell us what he knows about Jeffrey Epstein. Well, newsflash, Bill Gates is not going to do that. And Prince Andrew has shown that he's not interested in doing this. But again, with the information that I'm going to reveal today, there's going to be a clear answer, a better understood reason as to why Gates is not going to step forward and do this, and why Prince Andrew has not either. So, what I want to sort of start with is that article from the New York Times, October 12, 2019, in the New York Times. There was a photograph taken in 2011 in Jeffrey Epstein's mansion. In the photograph are 5 men. This is something you can find. You can just Google New York Times, Jeffrey Epstein, and you will find it for 2019. And in this photograph that has been widely circulated is James Staley, who at the time was a senior JP Morgan executive, the former Treasury Secretary Lawrence Summers, also known as Larry Summers. Jeffrey Epstein is in the middle, wearing jeans. Everybody else is sort of casually dressed. They're not really dressed for a very extravagant evening out. This was a cozy private dinner at Epstein's home. And then standing next to Epstein is Bill Gates. And standing next to Gates is Boris Nikolic, who was Bill Gates' advisor. And Boris Nikolic was the fallback executor for Jeffrey Epstein. So about less than 2 days before Jeffrey Epstein was found dead in his cell, and according to mainstream media, he died of suicide. I don't believe that, but I do believe he's dead. I think someone killed him, but I'm not going to get into that right now. He named Boris Nikolic as the third executor in his will. And he didn't do that because he didn't know Nikolic. And again, by the time I am done with this podcast, I think you will understand why he selected Bill Gates, kind of like right-hand man. But when Jeffrey Epstein died, Boris Nikolic said, "Oh, I'm very surprised because I barely knew the man. And so, no, I am not going to be living up to this request. I don't know him." And he sort of just disappeared into the background. We have seen many people disappear into the background. Um, so in 2011, it was reported in the New York Times in that article that Gates met with Epstein on a number of occasions, including at least 3 times at the townhouse and one time staying late into the night. And during that one time that he stayed late into the night, it was a dinner, and there were people present that I'm going to include, and I think I may have said this in a previous podcast, but Eva Anderson Dubin, who was Jeffrey Epstein's former, I'm going to say, quote, girlfriend, end quote, before Ghislaine Maxwell appeared on the scene. She was at this dinner, but she also had with her Selena Dubin, her then 16-year-old daughter. And Gates found them to be so delightful that he ended up staying very late at the dinner. Now, according to the information that has been written about and discussed regarding Melinda Gates' desire to get a divorce, it sort of stemmed from this article and the revelation that her husband, Bill Gates, has had perhaps a deeper relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. And again, by the time I am done with this, I'm going to show that he indeed had a deeper relationship with him, and as did some other men. And perhaps, Melinda, if you're listening, I'm surprised that you don't know, because I would think that you would know some of this stuff. So, one of the other things that was mentioned was that Gates was on Jeffrey Epstein's plane. So it was revealed that Bill Gates flew with Jeffrey Epstein from Teterboro Airport in New Jersey to Palm Beach on March 1st of 2013. And it was one of the flights that the pilot Larry Fiskowski, who was just one of the pilots. Jeffrey Epstein had 4 pilots, but we only have flight logs for one of the pilots. We don't have flight logs for the other pilots. But this was in March 2013. And so what I started to discover is that starting in 2011, Bill Gates had been renting property in Palm Beach. An obscure blogger who I guess lived in the area and was privy to gossip knew that Bill Gates had been renting property in Palm Beach commencing in 2011. Isn't that interesting? 2011 is when that photograph was taken in with Bill Gates and Jeffrey Epstein at Epstein's house. And starting in 2011, Bill Gates was secretly, through a trust, renting property for year 2011, for year 2012. Well, I guess he liked being a half hour away from Mar-a-Lago, which is where Donald Trump is, and being 35 minutes away from Jeffrey Epstein, that in 2013, he purchases the first house in Palm Beach. In Palm Beach in 2013, Bill Gates plucks down $8.7 million in cash to buy a house through a trust. So that he has been buying like in 2013 he purchases this house for $8.7 million in cash through a trust. I'm going to name that trust, but there's another trust that comes into play. So Bill Gates has been purchasing property behind the names of two trusts to obscure his identity, right? To add a layer of secrecy. Also, when you pay cash for a property, there's more secrecy because you don't have to go to a bank. You don't have to have documents. You don't have to have anyone knowing exactly what you're paying for a property. And as a real estate expert slash consultant of 20 plus years, I can tell you that when we hear that someone is paying cash for a transaction, there are red flags. When you pay cash for a property, especially uh, in the millions of dollars, we always suspect the laundering of dirty money. So that's a red flag, and the suspicion is always is the dollar amount quoted the actual dollar amount, because cash transactions might have a second layer, meaning maybe more money was paid or maybe money is given back. So when you're doing something with cash, especially real estate, that's just known as in the real estate world as sort of like burying dirty money, a perfect place to bury dirty money. So in 2016, Bill Gates, through another trust, purchases another another four parcels, making it a total of five parcels. And so the two trusts are, the first one is Mallet Hill, and the trustee of Mallet Hill is Bill McGowan. He is a partner at the Seattle-based K&L Gates law firm. K&L Gates law firm was founded by Bill Gates Sr., who is now deceased, but he is Bill Gates' father. Now, as I have said in previous podcasts and also on my Twitter, and also I think on my Epstein Project newsletter, BlackCube was sort of had an advisor and a law firm, and that was Bill Gates Sr. through K&L Gates. So that the same law firm that was advising BlackCube, the company that is staffed by former Mossad agents who infiltrated the life of Rose McGowan and Ronan Farrow on behalf of Harvey Weinstein, uh, who was introduced to BlackCube by Ehud Barak, the former prime minister of Israel. Well, it's a Gates connected company. Bill Gates himself is listed as a partner in K&L Gates law firm. Now, this law firm is the holding company, if you will, for Mallet Hill Trust and for Wellington Trust. So these two trusts are the companies that Bill Gates used to fund his purchase of the, like, I think he has over 20. Let me just see if I have information on how much property he has purchased. Well, he's purchased over 20 acres, and the reason he has said, and he has spent well over $31 million. And hey, he's a rich guy. He can buy property anywhere. However, and I'm going to be talking a lot more about information that's going to loop back to the people in that photograph, so bear with me. It's just that there's a lot to get through to. But that does sort of explain why Bill Gates would have been on Jeffrey Epstein's plane on March 1st, 2013, because he was already living in Palm Beach. And nobody has reported this. Mainstream media has been silent. Nobody has said, oh, yeah, Gates is another Palm Beach resident, and he's been here since 2011, and he's only 35 minutes away from Jeffrey Epstein. Well, gee, I wonder how many more times Epstein and Gates met each other, and that's why I say that Melinda Gates, she might be divorcing Bill Gates, but how she doesn't know that her husband is buying property in Palm Beach, that's a mystery to me. So she has to have also had knowledge that her husband is buying property in Palm Beach because one of the properties is supposedly being used by one of Bill Gates' daughters who likes horses and so on and so forth. Okay, so I decided, well, you know what? I just need to get a little bit more information on this. And I found a document that is like an internal document for K&L Gates. Somehow, sometimes one gets lucky, and I got very lucky. And so this document was over 40 pages long, but it had enough information that it gave me more dots to give you. So K&L Gates, who, as I said, they were the attorney and the advisor for BlackCube, which played all kinds of dirty tricks on Rose McGowan, had somebody infiltrate her life, pretend to be her friend on behalf of Harvey Weinstein, and, you know, in a way, threaten Ronan Farrow's life. He had to move, he was terrified. So, this company, and there is an arm, a British arm to British intelligence through Bill Gates' father's partner in his advisory role with BlackCube. And I went into that yesterday, and I'm going to just link to that podcast here because there's just too much information for one podcast. So in this 40 plus page document, it looks like K&L Gates is also a financial services company. So I'm going to read to you what I got from that internal document. It says K&L Gates maintains one of the most prominent financial services practices in the United States, with more than 150 lawyers practicing from Australia, Asia, Europe, and the United States, representing diversified financial services institutions and their affiliated service providers. And so they have hedge funds, separately managed accounts. Uh, they pretty much do what Jeffrey Epstein used to tell the world that he did. Oh, he was a hedge fund manager. Well, he wasn't. He was running what I have always called a a trafficking ring that was state sponsored by either one or more countries for their intelligence service. I say that, and Alex Acosta, if you remember, said we were told to back off. Jeffrey Epstein belonged to intelligence. Well, let me keep going with what I discovered in this internal document for K&L Gates. It was actually a a document for two companies. for K&L Gates and for another company called Investment Advisors Association. Well, there are some people that are involved that I'm going to sort of be discussing what they do. However, I have to get back to another place where I have that note. So bear with me. Bear with me here. Okay, in order to get that information, I have to get back into that document. So that is what I'm doing right now. And I was kind of like a little bit, not a little bit, a lot disappointed when I started to read who these people are connected to. And suddenly, it's like, wow, this is much more intricate and devious than even I suspected. So, okay, one of the partners of K&L Gates is a man by the name of Michael McGrath. Um, he helps the SEC and the NFA, and so he's got direct connection with these agencies within the government of the United States. And then there is Paul Glenn, who is with the second company that is working collaboratively with the Gates law firm. And he, and I have a lot on him, so just again, let me get my notes here. Okay, so Paul Glenn grew up in Cleveland, Ohio. Now, I don't have to tell anybody who's been following this story that Ohio is Leslie Wexner's kind of, well, I'm going to call it company because he's turned all of Ohio into his company. But also, it's the home for Google, it's the home for Facebook, it's the home for a lot of companies that are connected to um, intelligence agencies within the United States. And it's Cleveland, Ohio. So he grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, and he spent his professional career in Washington, D.C. Paul worked at the United States Securities and Exchange Commission, so the SEC again, as a trial attorney, and he was special counsel for the Division of Enforcement and the Office of General Counsel. He's also worked at the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, uh, then known as the OTS. He's worked for the United States Treasury Department as Deputy Chief Counsel and Special Counsel. Um, he's worked for banks, so on and so forth. So and he was also a member of some federal courts in Ohio, and so all right. And I'm only getting into two of the people of many people connected to these two companies in this special report that Bill Gates is a partner in, of the company, the law firm that his father created. Um, so what this shows is that these companies are not only connected to the United States government agencies like the SEC, but that there has been no disclosure on the part of Bill Gates regarding the fact that he runs financial advisory firms. Now, that takes me back to a a comment that was made in mainstream media, but nobody followed it up. It was about Bill Gates' relationship with Jeffrey Epstein and the fact that Gates denied working with Epstein, but that had he been working with Epstein, that this deal would have generated a large amount of money. And so I'm going to be talking about that in a second, but I want to preface it by saying that in this 40 plus page document, and I have to find the exact quote. So again, bear with me. Okay, it basically says that all firms must comply with JP Morgan standards. So remember, we have Larry Summers, we have Staley, who was the senior JP Morgan executive. We have Jeffrey Epstein, who was doing business with JP Morgan. And so one of their caveats is, oh, they have to comply with JP Morgan. We've heard that Jeffrey Epstein would funnel business to JP Morgan, but according to this document, so has Bill Gates. Bill Gates has funneled business to JP Morgan. And so I want to, for a minute, go back to the information about MIT and Joey Ito and that whole scandal. So it's already on the record that Jeffrey Epstein was giving money to MIT and giving money to Harvard. It's already on the record that Joey Ito resigned when it was discovered that he was trying to lie about money received by Jeffrey Epstein. So on October 16, 2014, Ito wrote an email to several people. He said, "Hi all, this is a $2 million gift from Bill Gates directed by Jeffrey Epstein." And then Bill Gates denied it. A spokesperson for Gates told Business Insider that although Epstein pursued Bill Gates aggressively, any account of a business partnership or a personal relationship between the two is categorically false. And he denied the contents of the email from Ito, saying any claim that Epstein directed any program or personal grant making for Bill Gates is completely false. Well, I don't think that's true. And the reason I don't think that's true is because I've known a lot of wealthy guys. And I will recount one story for you. I won't name the person, but this person was making an enormous amount of money with, doing business in other countries. And to avoid two things, well, to avoid paying tax on really large sums of money, he directed the company that was supposed to give him, uh, pay him, he directed them to give the money to the schools where his children were studying so that he would tell them, put on the check that this money is from me, but it goes to them. And that, even when I heard initially that Jeffrey Epstein had sort of like been the person and this is from Bill Gates and it's $2 million for MIT, I immediately remembered that story. And I remembered that it was to avoid paying an income tax and to go ahead and give the money to another source where, it can't really be traced back unless you know what you're looking for to the initial person. So I believe that it is quite possible that because Gates was also and is also in the financial industry business, that perhaps there was some deal that may have generated $2 million that would have been given to Jeffrey Epstein, but Jeffrey Epstein instead said, hey, why don't you give it to MIT? And so that Epstein would get the credit for it because it would still be from Epstein. He directed Joey Ito at MIT Labs to say, yeah, this is from Gates. So there's a lot of stuff here that also kind of brings in Prince Andrew. So if we remember his disastrous interview that he gave to the BBC in November of 2019, when he was, he was asked point blank, do you regret meeting Jeffrey Epstein? And his answer was something like, no, I don't, because of the contacts I met and the business relationships I met. Well, it's very likely that Bill Gates is one of those people because in another podcast that I did in the last couple of days, and again, I've had this information on my Twitter, Bill Gates and Prince Andrew shared Melanie, 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 and I'm going to leave it at Melanie. Just listen to my other podcast. Um, and Melanie is someone who Jeffrey Epstein started to help. And then Melanie, well, you know what? I might as well just say it. Melanie Walker uh, was somebody that Jeffrey Epstein promised to make a model, but somehow she became a neurosurgeon. And Melanie Gates was walking around with Jeffrey Epstein, and he would be calling her his quote science advisor. And then suddenly she's working with Bill Gates. And then, but before she even does that, she's flying off to the UK and spending time with Prince Andrew. And so there is a much cozier relationship, and since now we know that Bill Gates is a partner in his father's law firm, which is a financial industry law firm, which connects people to not just real estate deals, but to other investments, it's very likely that one of those people that he met through Jeffrey Epstein is Bill Gates. Because we have um, Melanie Walker as an example. And, how could Prince Andrew be upset that he met Bill Gates and that he benefited financially from this arrangement? So I want to add, because I want to bring this to a close, but I want to add that when I was and I'm just going to say, call it what it is, the blank slave to Michelle Rickless's son. Um, Michelle Rickless, like Robert Maxwell, ran a publicly traded company. And he was spending money like Robert Maxwell from this publicly traded company, Rapid American Corporation, as if it was his own money. And so he was called into the SEC. And at the time, uh, the person who was the head of the SEC was Stanley Sporkin. So him and Stanley Sporkin, they have a couple of meetings, they sit down. Michelin Rickless is never fined. He's never put in jail. He just, I guess Stanley Sporkham gave him a little piece of advice and said, take your company private, and he did. He took the company private. He bought it back. He took it away from the shareholders so that they would not accuse him of crimes he had already committed. And Stanley Sporkin, kind of like, shook hands with Michelin Rickless, and Rickless went ahead and continued to then um, sell the assets, which included artworks, which ended up at MoMA. So there's a lot of layers to this. And again, I can't get into every single layer. Uh, my point is that Stanley Sporkin, after doing this, and I don't know if it was a direct result of doing this, but what happens to Sporkin? He is then moved up the ladder within the United States government. And by the way, Michelin Rickless is an Israeli Mossad asset who helped the CIA. I know this for a fact. Okay, so he's a Mossad asset who was in the British military, just like Robert Maxwell, who is a spy. I'm getting messages while I'm doing this. I'm trying to ignore them. Who is a spy, but the three governments are kind of working together. So you've got the United States government, the intelligence agency of the United States, along with some of the regulatory companies. You have the UK, MI5, MI6 working also with this. And you have Israel's Mossad and their prime ministers. Um, I've already mentioned Ehud Barak as it pertains to Jeffrey Epstein, but there are many prime ministers that were involved. So that, and I'm getting another message. It's just, it's 5 o'clock in the morning my time. So I don't know why I'm getting so many messages. All right. So that Stanley Sporkin gets moved up and he becomes the attorney for the CIA. After Michelin Rickless sort of like scurries off like a big fat rat with billions of dollars, he has pretty much stolen money from investors, but he scurries off like a big fat rat. Stanley Sporkin becomes the um, attorney for the Central Intelligence Agency. My point is that with Bill Gates' connections to the SEC, to the Department of Treasury, and as we have seen, Stephen Mnuchin, right? What did he do? He worked for the Department of Treasury. We have a lot of these guys that are connected with Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell and Robert Maxwell in positions, high positions in our government, so that there are no checks and balances anymore. That means that if Bill Gates doesn't want to say hello to anyone, he doesn't have to. He is essentially a partner through this company that he has, that his father started, K&L, and through his own connections through Microsoft and the United States government and their secret programs to spy on citizens. Um, he doesn't have to tell anybody anything. Why? Because he too is an asset. He is like Leon Black, like Leslie Wexner, like Michelin Rickless, all of whom benefited from their relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein was running a child trafficking operation that benefited all of their deals. So that is my reveal for today. I would love to hear your comments. Please leave them um, in the comment section. And there's more. I mean, there's only so much I can do. It's already 40 minutes. So thank you for listening. Tune in again. Leave your comments. Thank you for following me. Again, it's Kirby Sommers for the Epstein Project podcast. Thanks. Bye.